Good afternoon to everyone here in Paris who is joining us here in the conference room. And good morning or good evening to everyone who is joining us online wherever in the world you are. We're just delighted to be here to talk about stakeholder capitalism. The private sector is increasingly seen as a key actor to promote and lead sustainable, equitable, and durable change. With this goal in mind, the stakeholder capitalism model could be an ideal solution. So what is stakeholder capitalism? It's a system where corporations are oriented to serve the interests of all their stakeholders. Under this system, a company's purpose is to create long-term value, but not to maximize profits and enhance shareholder value at the cost of other shareholder groups. Joining me to discuss stakeholder capitalism, building the future, is a really distinguished panel. We'll start with Jean-Marie Tritant, who is the chairman and CEO of Unibel Redamco Westfield, Claire Waysan, who is the executive vice president of Engie, and online, we're joined by Sarah Fryer, who is the CEO of Nextdoor, as well as joining us online is Lisa Johnson, the CEO of Swedbank. So why don't we start with a question for everyone? And since we're talking about stakeholder capitalism, I would like each panelist to address the question in terms of as part of your vision, is stakeholder capitalism involved in the visions of your company? And if so, what are you doing? Why don't we start, Claire, with you?
Well, good morning, everybody in the US, in Canada, and good afternoon in Europe, and maybe good evening in Asia. So stakeholder capitalism, and I think we'll have ample room to come back to your question. But to me, there is no opposition, contrary to what you said in your definition, if I may, between stakeholder capitalism and shareholder capitalism. I would say that, on the contrary, the way to maximize the long-term value of a company is to be fully aligned and to fully align the creation of value, of economic value, so economic performance, with a positive impact on the planet, on the environment, and on the people. When I say this, I just described to you what's the purpose of Engie. We, as a French company, have a French multinational. We have adopted a purpose, a raison d'être in French, which is inscribed in our bylaws. So the shareholders, in a very, quasi unanimously voted for this purpose to be inscripted in the bylaws, and this purpose exactly says that we will reconcile economic performance with positive impact on the planet and on the people. So to me, that's what stakeholder capitalism means. And for a company like us, it means that in our everyday act, be they small or be they big, like big decision investment, we take into account very concretely the impact of our decision on the people and on the environment, and in particular, as we are an energy company, on the carbon path that we are committed to being fully carbon neutral by 2045.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Sarah, next. Sarah, at Nextdoor, how is stakeholder capitalism part of your vision?
Thank you so much, and good morning from the West Coast. It's bright and early here. I'll just take a beat for those who don't know Nextdoor. Nextdoor is an app where you connect with the neighborhoods that matter to you so that you can create belonging. And when we think broadly about stakeholder value beyond shareholder value, Nextdoor was really founded thinking about all of the stakeholders of a neighborhood. In particular, a Pew Institute survey that really sadly showed that in the United States, 29% of Americans said they knew only a few neighbors, and 28% said they didn't know a single neighbor by name. And that demise of social capital, of community, we think is at the heart of a lot of global issues that we're talking about today, whether it's global warming, climate change, social unrest that comes with that. The lack of social fabric is often the heart of many of these problems, right? Caring locally. So as a company, purpose is incredibly important to us, broadly speaking. So our purpose is to cultivate a kinder world where everyone has a neighborhood to rely on. And so when we think about the stakeholders of our company, it is, of course, our employees, but it goes far beyond that. It's the almost 70 million neighbors on the platform. It's all of the public agencies, public services that are part of your community, the local fire department, all the way up to maybe a government institution. It is the local businesses, and they can be big businesses that act local, and they can be the really small sole proprietors. So as we build our platform, we are constantly thinking about how do we optimize for all those stakeholders, because we think it's a good long-term greedy decision to build a big, impactful global company.
Terrific. Thank you, Sarah. We'll now move on to Lisa, who is also online.
Well, thank you, and great to be here. I'm in Stockholm today, and I look forward to this discussion. When it comes to stakeholder versus shareholder management, I found this great definition on Investopedia, where it says that a shareholder has an interest in the performance of a company, but whereas a stakeholder has a greater need for the company to succeed over long term. And that is embedded in our vision. We aim to be a world leader in sustainable value creation. It is part of our customer promise, and we also changed our entire fiduciary duty to include the sustainability part of the dimension. If we look before we included this, normally in an asset management company, you would look at risk and return, and you have a two-dimension view on what you actually manage and how you manage the assets. So by changing our customer promise and actually changing the complete fiduciary duty, we introduced that third dimension, which is the sustainability angle. So we invest long term. We are large owners. We're one of the largest owners on the Stockholm Exchange. We manage $220 billion approximately. We're here for the long run. Our customers are long-term savers. It's a lot of pension money, retirement money. It's going to be on the stock market for 20, 30, 40 years even. And that is, so looking at sustainability factor, for us, it's just common sense. Those are the companies that will perform in the long run. So stakeholder management is, or capitalism is the core of everything we do. And that's how we manage the investments that we've been trusted with.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Why don't we now move to Jean-Marie? What's, in terms of stakeholder capitalism and part of your vision?
Yeah, thank you, John. It's somehow tough to be the last one because a lot have been said already, and I recognize myself and URW and what's, Claire was saying about, the purpose of a company, and I think I would be able to come back on this. I want also to take advantage of this, forum just to say thank you to Sarah. Because I moved, 3 years ago to Santa Monica, and Nextdoor has been a way for me to get connected to my direct neighborhood, and I see, how it helps myself and my family to settle down in Santa Monica in Los Angeles. So thank you for that. When it comes to the stakeholder capitalism, I think it's core to the businesses in which, or the business in which Unibail-Rodamco Westfield is, which is the commercial real estate sector. our assets are physically and economically, embedded in cities and territories in which you operate. And taking this into account, there is no way that you would be able to develop nor operate by not taking into account all the different stakeholders that you have around you. So we have a huge impact on cities. We have a huge impact on mobility, on where you create offices, where you create, commercial centers, or even, resi buildings. That has an impact on the global mobility of cities. So you need to think about it. So, and this is part of the discussions that we have with the cities, but not only with the cities, with the users of our buildings. So we are also working with the retailers when it comes to the shopping centers, with the corporations when it comes to our offices, and how do you take into account, their needs in what you deliver to them, such as you deliver something that is relevant to them. And this is for all type of stakeholders, obviously the cities as well, where you have also a huge impact on their revenue streams when it comes to the local taxes and departmental or regional taxes. So we have a huge impact on the ability for these, operators or local governments to get financed and to be able to finance some of their, public services that are playing something positive for our own assets and business.
Well, Jean-Marie, let's continue with you since you have the mic here. What are some of the challenges that you had to face in trying to institute a stakeholder model?
The difficulty is that you are playing with a lot of different, expertise within your own, company or enterprise. And how do you make sure that all these expertise are working together first to address all the different questions? And then how do you define the plan to have access to the different stakeholders? And how do you make this, in relation? Because you can be very good in development, and then you will look at, the layout of your building, work with your architects. But usually this is, the design team that is doing that, not the developer or the project leader who's maybe leading with the cities. And how do you make sure that we address first the 360 approach of the different stakeholders and what is at stake, and how do we transform this into a proposal which will be relevant for the different stakeholders? So creating, the connection between the people and be making sure that they work together is one of the most difficult aspects of the stakeholder, capitalism for us.
Great, thank you. I want to come back to Sarah, and I want to come back also with the same question because you have a very different business. What were some of the challenges that you had to face, Sarah, as you try to institute this new model?
Yeah, probably the biggest is this balance of growth versus, I would say, healthy growth. I think a lot of companies, particularly in Silicon Valley, right, we bow to the god of growth at almost any cost. And I think having to make some very tough business trade-offs on saying we will not be a growth at any cost platform. I'll give you some examples, right? We are a platform where people come together to connect maybe for the first time and to engage. I thank you so much, Jean-Marie, for that shout out, because that's what gets us up in the morning, that we bring a new neighbor into a new community and help them find their footing. But of course, often bad news sells more than maybe good news. John, you probably know this as a journalist. And so what we need to be very mindful of is causing engagement because of bad news, because of bad things happening on the platform. And so we've taken steps to slow people down. And that was a tougher business decision, often when you feel the pressure to hit growth and engagement numbers. The way we slow people down are when we see conversations getting more contentious or heating up. We actually worked with a social scientist out of Stanford to put in front of you a little pop-up. It's doing a couple of things. It's reminding you that great neighborhoods are created with kindness, but actually behind the scenes, it's bringing you back to this frontal lobe where your biases can be much more dealt with and where education kicks in. And it's also suggesting in a future state, what you're writing right now may get reviewed negatively. And humans don't like to think that in a future state that could happen. And so we actually do slow people down. Now, the good news is people continue to post, because what we don't want to do is stymie tough conversations. I sound American, but I grew up in Northern Ireland, and I'm a big believer that when you get to the point where communities are actually at war, you have to get them to talk and get them to lay out the contentious conversations. But in slowing people down, we've definitely given up some of our growth and some of that engagement because of a more long-term approach, which we think is ultimately better for all the stakeholders of the community, not just for the financial immediate shareholder outcome. And I loved what Lisa said, which is, though longer term, we think over decades, this is a much better financial decision, but short term, it definitely has implications for the business.
No, sir, if I can stay with you for a minute, because, and you brought it up, and that period that Nextdoor went through received tremendous amount of media attention. I wonder if there was ever a time when you felt during this period that Nextdoor may be suffering a fatal blow.
I think as a business, I think what you're referencing is going back to 2015. It was clear that some of the real bad things that can happen in neighborhoods, particularly racial profiling, were happening, being brought online. And for sure, that can be a fatal blow to a company, because beyond just the business model, it's a fatal blow to your employees, right? People become because of purpose. They want to believe that what they're creating is creating kindness in the world, in the case of our purpose statement. And so you really have to align all of your stakeholders behind that purpose and take really tough decisions. So in deciding in that case of racial profiling, we really switched how the app worked with regard to crime and safety. Today, we really just call it safety. And we really norm around things like, let's say, an elderly parent has gone missing in the neighborhood. They're suffering from Alzheimer's. That would be a great moment to get neighbors involved. People do care about their safety, so they'll often want to talk about, in my neighborhood, catalytic converters are getting stolen. So they want to talk about how to protect that. But we want to make sure we nudge them away from really the bad, unforeseen consequences. And again, that's a business decision that can feel like you're slowing down the growth, but we think it's worth it over the long run.
Thank you very much. I want to move on to Lisa, but I just want to add to what Jean-Marie said, Sarah, and tell you, I would know nothing about my neighbors were it not for Nextdoor. So thank you for that. Lisa, what were some of the challenges that you have had to face as you try to institute a stakeholder capitalism model?
Yeah. Well, I think there has been a lot of challenges, but what we have succeeded with, and this is this is very common for most of the mutual fund companies in the Nordic region, is that we actually attack the bulk of the capital. So when we started working with this, I mean, it was a lot of work with the financial, with the FSA to actually change the legal prospectuses of the funds. Can you have a passive fund that actually does take sustainability into account, or is that no longer an index near fund? We have to so there was a lot of work with the authorities, a lot of communication to our customers. But in Sweden, we also had the larger institutional community, and they have actually been driving the change and the expectations of us as asset managers. So it's been a very close cooperation with the clients. And when I speak to peers globally, and especially in the US, we can see the opposite taking place, where large mandates are given to the asset managers without any sustainability claims at all. And there, I think that we as an asset management industry have a huge responsibility to actually change the perspective for both of our customers, but also in the companies in which we invest. We really need to move away from the short-termism, because when speaking to any global asset manager today, I think I haven't met anybody in years who do not believe that the companies that truly incorporate sustainable strategies into their core will be the financial winners. They will attract the customers. They will attract the capital on the markets. So nobody is sort of saying you have to choose between sustainability and performance anymore. But we do have a huge responsibility to also educate the clients that we are no longer looking at the last quarter. We need to look at the long-term perspective. And we also need to give that trust or inspire the companies in which we invest that the last quarter's results are not that important. What we really need is for them to shape their future strategies, to future-proof their organizations. And when you look at the climate meeting in Glasgow, the COP26, the numbers of the asset managers and the firms that actually committed to net zero targets, I think now it's 450, almost 500. We were one of the principal signatories to the Net Zero Asset Managers Alliance. But if you look at those 450 firms that manage money today, they are responsible for 130 trillion US dollars. That's almost 40% of the investable capital of the world globally. And all of that money will need to be aligned because that's what we have committed to. So it's kind of easy to imagine where will the money flow and the pressure that actually puts on the companies to set up clear sustainability targets, to report on this. But that's where the stakeholder management actually comes in. This is for real. I'd say that shareholder capitalism is it's in the past. Now it's all about stakeholders because we need and we are more aware of the future. And it's also about how we create that revenue. And it's also looking at the longer scope. Even if you are a short-term investor, you still want the good companies in there. So I think we're seeing a transition here, but I do see that some larger firms are lagging behind. And now it's not about branding or tagging a new portfolio. It's actually about moving the existing bulk of the capital. And that's why I'm very optimistic about the world actually reaching the climate targets, because I do think that the stakeholder capitalism will win. So.
Thank you very much, Lisa. So, Claire, Lisa says that shareholder capitalism is in the past. I know you helped to run a major, massive company. Do you agree?
Yes, very much so, actually. So very, very happy to hear Lisa talk about the alignment. And we forcefully need the alignment between where the money goes and what useful, what positive it contributes to. We are faced by the biggest challenge of many centuries, which is climate change. We need the money to be invested into activities that will help transition towards carbon neutrality in a sustainable, in an affordable way. So that's very good news that we are now in a universe, and Lisa was saying this very, very clearly, where the money flows to whatever activities are sustainable. So yes, indeed, in a way, shareholders capitalism is now very much aligning with stakeholders capitalism in a broader way, in the sense that a sustainable business is a business that will be successful and good value for money in the long run, hence a good place to invest. And it's true that you were asking the others about challenges. It's true that you have to make choices. And sometimes along the way, when you define yourself for a big energy company like us, we define a carbon neutrality path that's very ambitious. And it means that there are certain activities that you will stop doing or do less of, and other activities that you will be doing more. In our case, we will invest more and more into renewables. We are accelerating our growth into renewables. We are also helping other companies, helping communities to reduce their own carbon footprint. And that's so in a way, we're making good sustainable business out of this stakeholders management that's for us totally aligned with what we see as a good, valuable, sustainable business for the company. So there is a challenge because sometimes you drop businesses that were profitable that you don't want to develop anymore, but there are also huge opportunities.
It makes me wonder because besides, of course, being praised ethically, how does serving all stakeholders lead to a competitive advantage?
Well, two very simple examples. The first one, I mean, I'm very convinced that the value of any company at the end of the day lies on its people, the quality of its men and its women. Well, what happened at my company, Engie, is that when we divided by 2 our carbon footprint linked to our production of electricity, we saw the number of applications to the company be multiplied by 3. So what better proof? I mean, when you align yourself with goals that are broader value to the entire community, you are also able to attract the best people. And they are at the core of the value of the business. So clear competitive advantage of having a business that makes sense and that's aligned with broader goals. Second example, if I may, that's much more local. When you think about energy today, well, yes, there still are some big, large-scale projects that you develop, but there are also more and more small-scale projects. Be it PV, so photovoltaic, be it wind farms, onshores, offshores. Well, when you're able to work with communities, you're able to develop these projects. And that's key. So the fact that we are a company that's very much used to engaging with communities, with local customers, and very attentive to this means that we are more able to develop our business. So there again, a good stakeholders management and taking into account broader views, not only short-term value, but also the community you are operating in is also a good way to make sure that you're able to grow your business.
That's an interesting point. And I want to pick up on that on a question to both Jean-Marie and then also to Sarah. I'm wondering, how can considering the long-term benefit of consumers assure a stronger stability and profitability of your company?
No, I think that, when it comes to the commercial real estate sector in which we are, it takes us, 10 to 12 years to develop a building, to develop a project. So you really need to anticipate what are, the major needs of your targets, I would say, of your prospects, whether there are corporations or there are users, retailers, visitors. So you need to take this into account, which means that at the onset or at the inception of each project, you need to ask yourself, what do you want to deliver? What do you want to provide as a service, as a product to the customers? When they will use our assets, when they would be right in the middle of the city, they would be there for long. And we are a long-term owner of our assets, which means that you will have somehow to also be responsible for what you deliver. And you will have to manage it, and you will have to deliver the right and relevant service to the people or to the communities we serve. So meaning that if you take into account, the long-term relationship with the customer or with your user, you will somehow define a very long and sustainable, relationship. It's also about loyalty. It's also about, how the people will look at what you do for them and how they would be somehow, and if we talk about, here, our business model, which is about rent, how much they are ready to pay. I think also, what the stakeholder, capitalism is giving us as an opportunity is also, to be a partner of choice. When we were talking about sustainability, I think that Unibail-Rodamco-Westfield defined a strategy in 2016, right after the COP21 and the Agreement of Paris, that was very aggressive regarding, our footprint, not looking only at the scope 1 or the scope 2, but looking from scope 1 to scope 3 and really having a strong ambition to reduce by 50% our carbon emission from the development to the operation of our assets. And that by doing so, and this is a long-term benefit and also, business benefit, we become a partner of choice for the companies that we are hosting in our office buildings. We have access to green financing, which is helping us, developing our projects.
I want to move on now to Sarah. I'm not sure if you heard the question, but I can repeat it. Just in terms of how can considering the long-term benefit of consumers assure a stronger stability and profitability over time?
Yeah, it's I agree with what Jean-Marie was saying, that it's so at the core of your business, right? If you think about local, first of all, I think we've seen a structural systemic change on what local means through the pandemic and as we come out the other side. People have realized just this need for proximity. There's tremendous power in it. Sadly, often in times of duress, so it could be something like a hurricane, a wildfire, or a global pandemic, it's often your neighbors who come to save you. It's actually not your friends and family who may be scattered all over the world. And in terms of valuing the consumer, if we value the consumer and do right by them, that's really at the core of our business. So when they come to Nextdoor, they know they can get trusted information from sources like the CDC in the US, UK.gov, the French Ministry of Health. They know that they come to give and get help, which was a core part of what we saw in the early stages of the pandemic, and that has continued with things like our help map, our help groups. And then thirdly, though, they come to create connections, starting off virtually behind a pane of glass, but importantly, they take that into the real world. And that's really at the core of how we feel we do right by consumers, is our goal is not to keep them forever engaged just in the app. We actually want them to form a group that they can take out to create human-to-human connection. I was on a roundtable last night with a group of neighbors in Australia, and it was so interesting to hear about the groups they had formed, whether it was a bushwalking group for over 60s. So a man had done it because he was very aware of this loneliness epidemic that was happening, particularly for our elderly people in our societies. Another had created just a coffee group, and leading into the holidays had now over 60 people signed up to get together for the holidays. So we think that in real life piece is really important. How that all winds together to a great business is clearly when people come to the platform, when it serves them in a way that makes them feel good about their community, good about themselves, it's improving their health, their wealth outcomes, and so on, then of course they're going to keep coming back. And when they keep coming back, that helps drive the flywheel of our monetization, which is mostly ad-based. But there again, we want to make sure ads are great content, not just an ad for the sake of an ad, but an ad that really feels like it's helping you in the moment, right? If I'm coming needing an emergency plumber and I see an ad from a small local business that's a plumber, that's content. That's not just an ad. And so those are just some of the flywheels we think about in terms of how do we make the consumer at the center of everything we do, because without them, our platform really doesn't exist and doesn't have value. So it's not something that we can add as a secondary component to our business. It's at the very heart of our business.
Thank you, Sarah. Hey, Lisa, Sarah talked about trust, and I want to pick up on that because in order for shareholder capitalism to work, I think you have to build trust across all stakeholders. For some companies, that must be the most difficult thing to do. How do you do that?
Well, for us as a company, we try to be very transparent. So all our methods, how we actually measure whether it's CO2 exposure from companies, how we target our goals. We set very ambitious climate targets. To give you an example, 2 years ago, we said that we wanted our entire fund capital to be Paris aligned by 2025 and carbon neutral by 2040. So this is 5 and 10 years prior to the Paris Agenda. And we said that because our vision is to be a world leader in sustainable value creation. And by being a world leader, we don't have hybrids. We don't aim to be the number one or the best, but we are in the forefront of sustainable investment. So we want to lead the way and show others how we do it. So we set up those targets. We are completely transparent. And this was in the beginning of 2019 that we don't know how we will measure this. But this is what we've got so far. So we continuously published every single data point that we are using to follow up on these targets. And now with the Net Zero Asset Manager, we actually concretized these part-time goals where we set up 3 more concrete targets. We showed what we've done with the carbon exposure since 2017 to now, which is a 50% reduction of the carbon exposure in our investments. Now we're resetting that to 2019 in accordance with the global metrics, how we calculate this. So we set up that we're going to work on the carbon exposure, but we need to work with the companies. We want the companies in which we invest to actually set science-based targets. So we set up firm commitments. So a year ago, 12% of our assets under management actually had a science-based target set. Today, a year later, I think we're approaching 25%. So it's a huge development in this area. And by 2030, we want 60% of the assets to have set science-based targets. So this is one way to actually get trust from both the companies in which we invest, but also from our customers to be extremely transparent on how we are working with these issues. We also set up how much we need to invest in climate solutions to be in line with the International Energy Agency's projections. We also set up targets on the dialogues of the most fossil-heavy companies in which we invest in the TCFD sectors. So I think that we can come a far way being transparent, but also being very humble about what we are dealing with here, because we don't have all the data. We know that we don't have scope 3 data. It's just estimates. So then we try to explain what is scope 3, what is scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. So what are the limitations that what we're doing? So I never want to be accused of greenwashing either from the companies or most importantly from our customers. So it's all about being very transparent and also dealing with what we have, because the worst thing I deal with and I meet a lot is that it seems like a lot of people use the lack of data as an excuse not to act now. And I think we have to work with what we have. We've seen an exponential increase in the data that we are getting from the companies, getting better by the day. And shortly, I'm sure we're going to have a sustainability standard connected to the IFRS accounting principles. So, I mean, we are moving quite fast ahead. So not blaming it on the lack of data, I don't think it's an excuse. And I also think that if I go back to our responsibilities to our customers to actually create value in a sustainable way, I think this is the way we do it, because we are moving the money where the money will end up, and the companies that actually will be able to attract money on the capital market. So trust, it's a very relevant question, and I think that being transparent and honest on how you're attacking this is the best way forward, and trying to speak a lot with the companies in which we invest and with media as well, to sort of get a more common understanding of the challenges, and also to create an interest, because I think this is everybody's responsibility to shape the future of the world, whether it's neighborhood corporations or whether it's your long-term investments. I think that every little piece counts. So we can all, I always say that the goal number 17, collaboration, is the most important goal of all. And I think that's the one where we can do a lot more, and starting today.
Terrific, thank you. I'm not sure whether you wanted a piece of that question, Claire, but I have another question that I wanted to ask you and every other panelist. But if you wanted, it seemed earlier that you wanted to get in on.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on the issue of transparency, because I fully agree it is key. We are in a world where things can be more and more measured, and they can be more and more certified. And I think it's key when companies commit to broader goals that they are ready to use agreed measures. We as a company, for instance, were among the first utilities in France to commit to an SBT certified trajectory. So yes, there are common methodologies, there are ways to measure carbon footprint that are solid. And we should be serious about the commitments we take. That's one. Take the commitments seriously and make them being audited, certified by SBT, by your own internal auditors. And second, as companies, we can very much engage with others. And Lisa, as an investor, is of course engaging with the companies she's investing in. We, as an energy company, are engaging with our customers that we help decarbonize, and we're also engaging with our suppliers. Our goal is to get all our suppliers SBT certified by 2030. So that's the second way to build trust and to build something that works for the community more broadly, which is the real decarbonation of the economy.
Claire, the question that I have for you next has to do with comments from critics. Critics of stakeholder capitalism often suggest that another way to transform is through consumer capitalism, where the purpose of any company is to generate more customers, therefore generating benefits for all stakeholders or shareholders. Could this be an easier option, you think, to adopt for companies, or is it avoiding the issue of creating an ethical environment between business, their ecosystems, and society at large? I know there's a lot there, but
there's a lot. No, my short answer is, well, customers are, of course, part of our key stakeholders, and as the others we're all saying, actually, that's at the core of our business. We need to produce, we need to sell, and we need our customers to be satisfied with what we provide them with. The good news in my area is that for a long time now, more and more companies are, in a way, walking the talk, wanting themselves to decarbonize. So that's a lot of, and that's exactly the business we're in for part of our activities. So the fact that we are consumer driven in decarbonization is a good news for the customers, good news for our business, and good news for the planet. This being said, it's important to care about other stakeholders as well. Yes, we have customers, we have suppliers, and I talked about suppliers, we have our employees, and we have the communities we are operating in. And as I was saying before, as an energy company, you have to care about the community you're serving, investing in, if you want to be able to develop projects, in particular in renewable energies. And when you think about renewable energies installations, be they windmills or be they photovoltaic panels, well, they take some space, they exist in the landscape. So you'd better be in a situation where you're able to gain support from the community, the municipality you're installed. You can do it through, and we invest a lot in the dialogue with the communities. We also have, in a number of cases, some crowdfunding or some kind of collective participation to the project, which enables the community to actually own the project. So this is a bit of a long answer, but to say, yes, of course, customer capitalism is key, but it's not the only one. The other stakeholders, including the communities we operate in, are key too.
Yeah, serves me well because I asked you a very long question, so that. Well, let's go to Sarah with a version of the same question about consumer capitalism and the comments from critics that that may be a better way to go. Have you heard that? And and how much attention do you pay to what critics say?
Yeah, so for sure we do get a push. As I said in the beginning, this very tough decision between engagement and growth. And so often people will say, why aren't you bigger, right? If Nextdoor is such a great idea, why aren't you even bigger? And we always respond, we are growing very fast. We just went public and now we have new funds to invest in that growth. But we've also grown very mindfully. And for sure, again, that is a tough decision that not everyone out there in social media wants to make. I think there's another element to it as well, which is, when you are getting some of that pushback, whether it's from investors or other stakeholders, I think it's important to bring diverse perspectives to the table. And one of the things I've found really helpful at Nextdoor is beyond just our board. And I know you had some questions or some thinking on boards generally and what could boards do, but we have also brought in concepts of advisory boards. So all in, we have our core board of directors, but we have a neighborhood vitality advisory board. We have an SMB advisory board. We have a customer advisory board, and we have a public agency advisory board. So all in, we end up getting probably close to 70 people, not just kind of a typical board of directors of maybe 10 people, who are weighing in and helping us really think through the short-term and long-term implications of some of these tougher decisions that we're making. And so, it's kind of a long way to answer your question of, is it hard? And do you have critics? The answer is yes. But I think when you surround yourself with people who are in it for the right reason, who are really there because they buy into cultivating a kinder world where everyone has a neighborhood to rely on, that helps bolster you. And I think it helps build really great ideas at the table. And one thing I'm incredibly proud of is when you look across those boards, we're almost 50-50 from a gender perspective. We actually tip slightly female. And from an underrepresented minority perspective, we're now at almost 40%. The other thing I've been really mindful of, even with my executive team, is over 70% of us were not born in the United States. And I say that because often I find US companies can get very insular and not perhaps global in their thinking. Very generalized statement, so apologies if I offended someone out there. But I think for all of us, thinking about just how do you bring that global diversity of perspectives, whether it's at your board level, at your advisory board level, at your executive team level, and then of course, trickling it down through the whole company. I think that's something that helps you stay strong when you're coming under pressure to perhaps make a more short-term oriented decision against what you think is better for the long run, for your company and for what you're building for your communities.
Well, Sarah, you also answered the last question I had, which was going to be about boards. So thank you very much. And sadly, we're out of time. I want to thank everyone for a great discussion. Lisa, Sarah, Claire, and Jean-Marie. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.